This will be my GCD entry for the area of expertise of multilingualism. So the two languages that I'm native and exposed to are Japanese and English. Now I can also speak Thai as well, but I think I'm more comfortable with Japanese and English. And for writing, I'll write two diary entries, one in Japanese and one in English, and I'll be translating the Japanese one into English and the English one into Japanese, which will also demonstrate my translating abilities between those two languages. Now in my life, I think that my fluency in those two languages is really a convenience, as I'm able to communicate in many places around the world, and I'm also able to communicate with my family members, and I'm really grateful for the education I have, because if not for the international schools that I've been in, I would not have been able to learn English, and if not for the efforts that my parents took to making me bilingual and trilingual, I would not have been able to speak and communicate with family members at all. And as English is a language that lots of people speak around the world, I think that it is an important skill that I have now, and I'm still very grateful for the education that my parents have chosen for me. So as evidence of my fluency in both Japanese and English, I'll be reading the book Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka in both English and Japanese. I'll start with the English version. One morning, as George Samsa was waking up from his anxious dreams, he discovered that in bed he had been changed into a monstrous verminous bug. He lay on his armor-hard back and saw, as he lifted his head up a little, his brown, arched abdomen divided up into rigid bow-like sections. From this height, the blanket, just about ready to slide off completely, could hardly stay in the place. His numerous legs, pitifully thin in comparison to the rest of his circumference, flickered helplessly before his eyes. What's happened to me? He thought. It was no dream. His room, a proper room for a human being, only somewhat too small, lay quietly behind the four well-known walls. Above the table, on which an unpacked collection of sample class goods was spread out, Samsa was a traveling salesman, hung the picture which he had cut off an illustrated magazine a little while ago, and set in a perfectly gilt frame. It was a picture of a woman with a fur hat and a fur boa. She sat erect there, lifting up in the directions of the viewer a solid fur muff into which her entire forearm had disappeared. Gregor's glance then turned to the window. The dreary weather, the raindrops were falling audibly down on the metal window ledge, made him quite melancholy. Why don't I keep sleeping for a little while longer and forget all this foolishness, he thought. But this was entirely impractical, for he was used to sleeping on his right side, and in his present state he couldn't get himself into this position. No matter how hard he threw himself onto his right side, he always rolled again onto his back. He must have tried 100 times, closing his eyes so that he would not have to see the wiggling legs, and gave up only when he began to feel a light, dull pain in his side, which he had never felt before. Now I'll be reading it in Japanese. ある朝、グレーゴルザムザが何か気がかりな夢から目を覚ますと、自分が寝床の中で一匹の巨大な虫に変わっていることを発見した。彼は鎧のように硬い背を下にして仰向けに横たわっていたのだ。頭を少し持ち上げるとアーチのように膨らんだ褐色の腹が見える。腹の上には横に何本かの筋がついていて、筋の部分はくぼんでいる。腹の膨らんでいるとこからかかっている布団は今にもずり落ちそうになっていた。たくさんの足が彼の目の前に頼り投げにピクピクと動いていた。胴体の大きさに比べて足はひどく細かった。これは一体どうしたことだと彼は思った。夢ではない。見回す周囲は小さすぎるとはいえ、とにかく人間が住む普通のお部屋。自分のいつもの部屋である。四方の壁も見慣れたいつもの壁である。テーブルの上には生地のサンプルが紐をほどいたまま雑然と散らばっている。ザムザは外交販売員であった。テーブルの上方の壁には絵がかかっている。ついこの間、営利雑誌にあったのを切り取って小切れな金箔の額に入れてかけておいた絵だ。毛皮の帽子をかぶり、毛皮の襟巻きを巻いた婦人が一人きちんと椅子にかけ、大きな毛皮のマフの中にすっぽり差し入れられた両腕を前に差し出している絵である。それからグレイゴルは窓の外を見た。陰気な天気は気持ちを広くめいらせた。法もないことを全て忘れてしまったのだろうかと考えてもみたが、しかしそれは全然実行不可能だった。なぜかというと、 グレーゴルには右を下にして寝る習慣があったが、現在のような体の状態ではそれではできない相談であった。どんなに一生懸命になって右を下にしようとしても、その度にぐらりぐらりと体が揺れて、結局元の仰向けの姿勢に戻ってしまう。100回もそうしようと試しみただろうか。その間も目はつぶったままであった。目を開けていると、もぞもぞ動いているたくさんの足が嫌で見えてしまうからだ。しかしそのうちには、脇腹のあたりにこれまでに経験したことがないような軽い陣痛を感じ始めた。そこで仕方なく右を下にして寝ようという努力を中止した。These diary entries, which shows my writing and translating skills in both English and Japanese, can be found in the description of this video.